I'm a Zionist and I'm a proud Zionist. I don't care who that offends either. I'm proud to be Jewish. I'm proud to support Israel. And I'm proud to be a Zionist. And I don't give a damn who that offends either. I know there's people out there that want to use the word Zionist like it's some kind of dirty word. I try not to go, honestly. I mean, I don't really like going to Muslim countries, I'll be honest with you.
Have you been to Israel?
I don't have a
Muslim
desire
countries
to go
or
to
any
Muslim
Arab countries?
countries.
Have you been to
Who's shooting?
Hold on. Well, Israelis in many cases.
But that's
in
a
some
big part,
cases,
right? In many
okay,
cases,
in
though,
many cases, I'm not saying all, because I'm not being black and white here. Okay, but let me make my point. You say might makes right? Okay, well then guess what? We're going to use all the might we have. It's exactly what you're saying. But I just asked if that's what you were saying, and you said yes. So what policies should we have? Do you think we've been too soft on the Muslims over the last 20 years? We got to really understand that Islam is a threat and do what? Fight 7 wars?
No, I'm not in favor of going to war.
But who reflects on the last 20 years of American foreign policy and goes, the problem is we never recognized that Islam was a threat.
Hey y'all, this debate happened a while ago with Dave Smith and Zionist Laura Loomer with the host Adam Sosnick, who we all know and love from PBD Podcasts. The reason why I bring it up is because their talking points are still the same till this very day. As a matter of fact, this debate should have came with a warning label, because watching Laura Loomer pretend to care about human life while defending the slaughtered Palestinian is peak cognitive dissonance. She says she's pro-life, yet defends bombing hospitals and starving babies. This is not a political stance, this is a psychopathy with a press badge. Dave Smith, however, doesn't let it slide. You'll see he's going to bring the maturity, receipts, and moral clarity, and actually a backbone, something Laura and host Adam Sosnick are going to be clearly lacking. Adam tries to play the neutral referee, but ends up enabling nonsense again. And remember, this is the same guy who fumbled the Boston Yusuf interview on PBD and now refereeing someone who thinks human rights are optional based on religion. But be the judge of it for yourself. Let's watch this unfold.
Do you know what Israel's doing right now? Israel is delivering incubators. You have IDF soldiers risking their lives, okay, going into Gaza where they know that people want them dead because they were born Jewish, okay, and they are delivering incubators for Palestinian babies inside a hospital because Hamas has a tunnel underneath the hospital. They are making the Palestinian people human shields.
Sure, let me ask you. Let me ask you something.
What she did say was actually true about, I think 20% of is the army. IDF is Arab. They have members who are Arab in the Supreme Court.
These people
where there are absolutely
living in a
zero
prison.
Jews allowed in Gaza.
Oh, no question.
So there is
about
a distinguishment there where
there's a distinction.
I'm
not denying that there's a distinction.
Arabs are allowed to be in Israel, and many love their life there. I think the majority do. Whereas 0 Jews are allowed to live
absolutely.
in Gaza. So
it's not a fair comparison, Dave.
Well, look, I mean, no,
it's not a fair comparison.
Well,
what you're saying, and it's not a prison.
What comparison did I make that was unfair?
Well, what you had said before.
Have you been to Israel before?
Many times.
How many times have you been there?
I've been to Israel about 6 times. And prior to COVID, I used to, there was a group called the United West. Yeah. And, I'm a Zionist and I'm a proud Zionist. I don't care who that offends either. I'm proud to be Jewish. I'm proud to support Israel. And I'm proud to be a Zionist. And I don't give a damn who that offends either. I know there's people out there that want to use the word Zionist like it's some kind of dirty word. But I firmly stand against that. And I used to lead a group of people. They were both Jews and Christian Zionists. And we would take a border security trip every single year. And we would teach American Zionists, a lot of evangelicals, Christians and Jews, and we would teach them about border security. And we would go to the Lebanon border. We went to the Gaza border, and we would show people the importance of walls. And this was even before President Trump was first elected. This was in 2015, 2016. And I continue doing this all throughout the Trump administration as well. And a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the Israeli designer of the wall on the border between Israel and Gaza was actually contacted by the Trump administration, and his guidance was sought in terms of how to design the structure for the United States border wall.
Have you been to any Middle Eastern countries other than Israel?
Yeah, I've been to the UAE. And I have, let's see, where else have I been? I try not to go, honestly. I mean, I don't really like going to Muslim countries, I'll be honest with you.
Have you been to Israel?
I don't have a desire to go to
any
Muslim
Arab countries? Have you been to the Middle East?
No, I've never been to Israel, but I'm from New York City, so I grew up way Jewier than that.
He's from New York.
So what do you say to the people that say, look, you've never been there, man?
But I think we should go. Like, I would love to go to Israel with you. I would love to take you to Israel so that you can see.
We might give it a few months.
No, but seriously, everybody should go and see for themselves.
Listen, look, it's just all of this, right? Like, let me first say, it's totally irrelevant. And you could say that if somebody in the year 2002, when the war drums were beating to go fight a war in Iraq, And if I were to sit here and say, we should not fight this war in Iraq, and then someone else goes, he's got weapons of mass destruction, and he's in bed with Al-Qaeda, and they go, and I've been to Iraq, so I know. Like, okay, but that's totally irrelevant to whether. Hold on, let me just say. That's totally irrelevant to whether you're right in the
actually
argument.
Seeing what's going on, like on the border.
Sure, but lots of people can go to countries and not. Someone could come visit America, and that doesn't mean they understand the totality of America.
There is a difference between going to the U.S. Mexico border and when you're talking about the border situation.
I'm not saying you can't gain any knowledge from going there, but I'm saying it's irrelevant to whether you're right or wrong in the argument.
It's not irrelevant when you saw what I saw.
Let me just say, look, to your point, because I want to actually grant a point here, because I do think there's an asymmetry in this debate where I'm not sitting here and saying Palestinians have never done anything wrong to any Israelis, and I would never even address the fact that this and this and this was a war crime or this. I certainly will. There have been lots of those, okay? And it is certainly true, and a lot of the kind of pro-Israeli loudest voices like to make this point a lot. Ben Shapiro's and probably yourself, and this is a fair point that I think everybody should recognize.
And I'm not a fan of Ben Shapiro, I'll just say.
Sure, but I'm just saying.
He may be Jewish, but just because he's Jewish doesn't mean that I agree with everything
that Ben Shapiro
says.
Well, I wasn't saying just because he's Jewish, because we're all Jewish. I'm just saying that other loud pro-Israeli voices will make this point, which you probably would agree with, so just listen to what I'm saying, that if all of us had to live as the average Arab citizen of a country, and we had to pick which country we were going to live in, and you get the average citizen's life. We'd all want to be in Israel. That is the best. If you were an Arab citizen in Israel, that is way better than being the average citizen in Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Jordan or any of these guys. So I will totally grant that.
Maybe the UAE.
No.
Not average.
No.
Not average.
Okay.
No, see, you're thinking of the elite. See, you hang out with Patrick Bet David. You're not going over there and hanging out with the average people.
The guys in Dubai.
Okay?
I see what you're saying.
So that's different.
I'm not
talking about like the 1%. I'm saying the average person there. Okay. And by the way, because I love liberty and I respect civilization, I recognize that. I think there's a fair reason to kind of support the people of Israel and the country. But the point is that that's irrelevant to the conflict, okay? In the same sense that if you were in a bar fight and someone, and if a cop showed up and you were like telling them you saw a bar fight and you were like, this guy came at this guy with a bottle and he punched him back in the face. And then you went, oh, well, then I guess that guy was defending himself and this guy was the aggressor. And then if someone else came to the cop and they go, yeah, but the guy coming at him with a bottle, he's really good to his wife. Like he always tells her she's beautiful, he doesn't cheat on her, he doesn't do anything. You'd be like, yeah, but that's irrelevant to the conflict here. So just for an example, if you look, the average Muslim citizen in America has a much better life than the average Muslim citizen in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. But if you said who was the good guys and who were the bad guys in the war in Iraq, well, the bad guys were the American military who were invading under false pretenses. Or really say the bad guys were the Bush administration, Dick Cheney and George W. Bush. The soldiers were maybe brainwashed into it. But you get the point I'm making here? That even though we are a superior civilization than Saddam Hussein's Iraq was, that doesn't mean that you're not guilty of any crimes when you go over there and slaughter 1 million people and displace 15 million more on a war sold on lies. And the fact is that you can ignore it all you want to, but if you're going to pretend that there are no crimes, no moral crimes and legal crimes that have been committed against the Muslims by the Jews from 1948 till today, you are not living in reality. The truth is it's inexcusable what Israel has done to these people. They won a war in 1948 and they won a war in 1967, so these people have to be subjugated for eternity? And you think that's not going to breed blowback and resentment?
But so are you basically proposing that we turn New York back over to the British?
No. Why would I be? How would that even follow? Because how would that even follow?
No, because you're like, oh well, these people won a war, and so they have to be subjugated for eternity. That's what happens when you win wars, dude. You know, like you win a war, you win a war, and you control the narrative and you write history. So are you basically saying that we need to we need to turn over land back to the British, or we need to turn over land back to the Indians. I mean,
well,
do you see how ridiculous this sounds?
Well, right.
The Indians got their
but you live in New
actually,
York. Should we give New York back to the British? I'm asking you a question because that kind of is what you basically
said.
Okay, so actually, the Indians in the example makes more sense.
No, it actually makes more sense with regards to
you asked me a
the British.
question, so let me answer. Okay, no, it actually makes more sense in terms of the Indians because they were the indigenous people living here, and we kind of kicked them out. And the British were our colonizers who invaded us, and we fought them off. So that's just a totally apples to orange.
But you're accusing the Israelis of being colonizers.
Laura, let me just speak.
But I'm just saying you accuse the Israelis of being...
The example, if you just follow what I'm saying, the example to the natives would make more sense. But look, here's the thing, right? It seems pretty universally agreed upon in modern society that what we did to the Native Americans wasn't completely right. Now, I'm not saying we're going to give all our land back to them because of that. But at the same time, I'm also not saying that Israel should leave all of Israel and give it all back to the Palestinians. The point is that there's still 2 million in Gaza and, what is it, 3 million, something like that, in the West Bank. Okay, so the point is that if you can recognize that something was wrong, I'll be the first to recognize what we did to the Native Americans was wrong. That was not okay. And so now you're also adding the fact that this was not it starting in the 1400s up through the 1700s. This was in 1948 when all of our grandpas were alive. That's not such a long time ago. There are people, not that many of them now, but there are people in Palestine who were the original people there. And so, yes, of course, it's worth it to at least recognize that this happened. It was wrong, and there are going to be resentful feelings about that. But no, I wouldn't say we should give it back.
It was wrong that Israel was surrounded by Islamic aggressors on every single border.
They weren't surrounded.
Yes,
they settled there. They chose that they wanted to have a Zionist project and go.
It is wrong. No, but you're talking about a Nakba, I assume, right? And so the reality is that this idea that, oh, the Jews just drove all of these Palestinians away. No, there were many Palestinians who said, you know what, we don't want to be casualties of a war because of all these, invading Islamic armies that are going to surround. And so there's a lot of people that fled on their own accord because they didn't want to die.
Did they want to come back?
They wanted to, well, you have to ask them.
So so let me just respond to a couple things you said here, because this is, I think, really important and gets to the crux of the matter. So number one, I'd say, okay, if you fled, some of them were forced out, some of them fled. We know all this from the historical record. Regardless, if some people start shooting outside my house and I take my family and run, I don't think that means that they own my house now. But
but who was shooting?
Hold on. Well, Israelis in many cases.
But that's
in
a big
some
part,
cases,
right? In many
okay,
cases.
In many cases, I'm not saying all, because I'm not being black and white here. Okay, but let me make my point. This is the bigger point. Here's the bigger point, because I think this is the height of the whole debate here. What you said before is you go, look, yeah, they won the war, and they get to write the history books, and they get to control the land. That's the way of the world, right? That was literally what you just said.
But that is the way of the world.
Okay, fine. But then own that. If you're just saying might makes right, and that's okay, fine. But then accept this. You don't get to look at these Islamists and say you're a bunch of barbarians, because all you're saying is might makes right. And you know what their response to that is? October 7th. That's the response. You say might makes right? Okay, well then guess what? We're going to use all the might we have. It's exactly what you're saying. I just asked if that's what you were saying, and you said yes. So if you're going to say that,
look at the way we think about ourselves here, right? In terms of the British colonizers, okay? Like, what about? That's why I gave the example that I gave, because it's just ridiculous. Like, are we going to turn over New York back to the British or back to the Native Americans? It's the same exact concept. What do you want to do? Are you just going to surrender Israel to the Arabs?
But I already said no to that. I said no.
But me making that example isn't me just saying, oh, might makes right. The fact of the matter is this was planned. This was planned to be symbolic, okay? This was done on the 50-year anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. This was done on Shabbat. This was done during a Jewish holiday, okay? When the Jews were not using electronic devices so that people couldn't even call for emergency services, so that people couldn't even communicate with their loved ones. This was planned. This was done, and it all relates to Islam. We need to have a conversation and start educating people about the barbarism of Islam. And they need to understand what the Treaty of Hudaybiyah is. Our politicians need to understand this as it relates to foreign policy, so that we don't spend billions of dollars, trying to implement peace in the Middle East, because there's never going to be peace.
So what policy should we have? Do you think we've been too soft on the Muslims over the last 20 years? We got to really understand that Islam is a threat and do what? fight 7 wars?
No, I'm not in favor of going to war.
But who reflects on the last 20 years of American foreign policy and goes, you know, the problem is we never recognized that Islam was a threat. We've never done it. We've just been leaving them alone this whole time. Maybe we should bomb 7 of their countries for 20...
But that's the problem, Dave. But that's the problem, right? You had George W. Bush in the aftermath of 9/11 who said that Islam is not our enemy, right? And then he invited...
That was his problem? That he said one nice thing about Islam. No, but not that he launched two stupid catastrophe wars.
But we wouldn't have needed to launch wars in the Middle East if our lawmakers understood that we were never going to be able to export democracy to the Middle East, okay? And so that really is the true anti-interventionist stance, is that when you have an actual understanding of Islamic doctrine and the fact that these people don't want peace, they don't want to coexist with other people, okay? They want you to either believe in Islam, they want you to be one of them. It's convert, submit, or die.
All of them. So that's all of them.
So
how much blood was spilled trying to export democracy
Nobody is denying on this panel that it was an absolute catastrophe.
Hold on, Laura. That don't believe in human rights.
Laura,
you don't believe in human rights.
I do believe in human rights.
How many Palestinian babies can be killed? Is there a limit to it? Is there a limit where you go, that's a, no, you don't know. So don't tell me you believe in human rights.
We don't know how many, we don't really know how many people have actually been killed.
Nobody here is denying. Let me say this,
guys. Is there a limit, though, where you'd go, that's too much?
Relax.
Is there a limit? Is there a number of Palestinian babies?
I'm going to ask you a question because you guys aren't hosting the panel.
That's not what I'm saying. Oh, so it's all their fault.
Nobody's denying.
Can I be real with y'all before you slide me away into the YouTube vaults? I'm tired. I'm tired of watching these arrogant, clueless Zionists gaslight the world with the same recycled script. Have you been there? That's the go-to line now, from Douglas Murray to Doran Spielman to Laura frickin' Loomer. They all hit copy and paste, like being born in New York and vacationing in Tel Aviv gives you the moral authority to erase generation of Palestinians off the map. Laura, nobody's allowed into Gaza. And by the way, Laura has no accent, no cultural tie to the land, no Semitic roots, but she has the nerve to tell people born in Gaza that it's not theirs, that they should just accept their annihilation because Israel won a war. What the hell kind of twisted logic is that? That's not a debate, it's colonial cosplay with a side of genocide cheerleading. And Adam, don't think we forgot you. You're the same guy who ruined a perfect good sit down with Bassem Youssef by acting like a TikTok bro with a podcast mic. You bring zero depth, zero moral backbone, and somehow think playing middleman in a slaughterhouse conversation gives you journalistic credibility. It doesn't, especially while playing referee. But meanwhile, Dave Smith, God bless him, is out here trying to inject basic human decency into a room full of people who treat dead children like footnotes, and he has the right to be frustrated. So if you're done with watching psychopaths sell a war as morality, hit like, drop a comment, and share this, because if we don't call it out, they'll keep getting away with, have you been there? Catch you later.